So picking up where we left off, we introduced the new library of React.js. And essentially, we're just using what we already learned, which is just JavaScript. And we're just using it to develop differently. We're developing applications differently. So instead of building a whole web page, we're building certain parts of the web page. We're building the components. And something that's really cool is that there's other languages as well that does a similar thing, but the React is the most up and coming and the most popular. And if you don't believe me, here is a tool. It's called NPM Trends. And since React and other libraries are just libraries, right? They're NPM packages. And this website actually shows the trend of downloads. How many downloads have someone downloaded the React package, or the Angular, or the Vue. So the blue is the React, and orange is Angular, and green is Vue. So you can see that compared to other languages where they're kind of neck and neck, React just smokes them out. And it almost is outstanding in some parts as well. And even when there's a dip right here, it still outweighs it as well. So that's why it's a new up-and-coming language. And this is the past 2 years. And we can look in the past month even of how much that people have downloaded and used the tool. So yeah, if you ever need to look up some packages, go to NPM Trends. That's the website to compare and contrast certain libraries together. And it does even more statistics of like how many do people star for, how many issues does it have, when was the last time it was created and updated, and what is the size. So React is a lot more smaller than the other two. It's only 2.7 KB. So, and that's when you minified zipped it. So that's awesome. So with that, yesterday we talked about a few things. We talked about the virtual DOM, talked about props, state, JSX, and components. And with components, there's essentially 2 types of components. The terminology that we'll use to help you remember is logical components and presentational components. So logical components do some sort of logic, or it has something that you need to store in, and the keyword is class. Later on Monday, we'll be adding one more thing to the logical component. And if you're using life cycle methods, then you would use a logical component. The other component is a presentational component. It's something that it's just something you want to display onto the screen. And that starts off with the keyword cons. And then later on, we can see how we can shift our way to just using presentational components. And then we talked about higher order components, especially with props. Props are just properties passed down from parent to child. It's one way and read only. And state is just storage, component-wide storage. So every single component that we create always have state and props. So just be aware of that. And then picking off where we left off, we were building an example with a counter and a to-do list. And we finished the counter, but we haven't finished the to-do list. And here's the schematics of the structure. So we're actually at this level, and we're working on the form. As you can see here on the board, I have that we're passing down named to-dos to lists through props. So the name is the name of the to-do, and then the to-do itself is an array of objects. So all of the to-dos in there. So let's go to where we left off, which is the to-do form. So we're getting ready to add a to-do with this form. And then we are adding it to the array. So just a quick run through of this form is that we're storing whatever the user is typing in through the state. So for a to-do item, it only has a name. That's the only thing we're storing. And then it also has a form and a name and a value, as well as an on change. So anytime the user updates the input, it will also update the state to whatever the user typed. And that's because of this line. It matches up the name to whatever the input name is, as well as the value from the state. And then our next step is to do a handle submit. So after they're done typing things out, they're able to submit their to-dos and it will render onto the screen. So that's where we left off. Okay, so I'm going to do some pseudocode here because there is some steps for when we submit. So when we submit, we should handle the default, which is stop the page from reloading. And the reason why we don't want that is because every time the page reloads, it loses our data before we can save it. So we don't want that to happen. That's why we prevent the default action of reloading. And we already handled that first step. The second step is we need to add the item to the to-dos array. That's the second step, is whatever the user input is, we need to add that onto our collection of to-dos. And then lastly, this is optional, but it's a good UI experience. We need to clear out the form. That way they're able to submit a new to-do if they want to. So these are the steps, and we'll be knocking them out one by one. So let's do this one here. Add the item to the to-dos array. So before we do that, we need to think about the structure, right? The structure of our application. So where exactly is the to-do array located? In app.js. So technically, if you think about it, it can be in list.js. But the reason why we put it in app is because the form and the list are synchronous. You can't pass down props through synchronous. You can only do it from parent to child. That's why we need to put all the logic of the to-dos inside of a higher order component, which is app. That's why the array is stored in app. So when we submit the form, it will update the array in app, as well as update the list that's being rendered here. So let's write that out. Let's go to our app.js, and we will create a function to add the item onto this array here. So we'll be adding a new item. So let's say the user types in learn books, then it will be another object with another ID and the name and complete and all that. So let's do add item. And in this case, we're passing in either an object or a field. In this case, we're only making the name for now, but in other cases, you need to pass in a whole object. So it could be a to-do object or just a field that you're doing. But since we're only doing one field and having everything else handled for us, we just need to pass in the field, so name. So with the name being passed in, we are going to take to-dos and make another object with whatever the user inputted, and then set the to-do array to that new object being added. So first off, we need to grab the array. And we'll do it with object destruction. But you can still do it with this.state.todos. But to make it easier on ourselves, we'll do object destructions of to-dos. So we're grabbing to-dos from this.state and creating a variable called to-dos. So now we have access to this array. Now for the second step. Our second step is to create an object for the user to have inputted their value in. So I'm going to call this new to-do. That's just a variable name. And we're not object destructuring here, so we don't need the curly braces. We're just creating a variable. And then let's create the object. So let's see what the to-do item has, this object. So it has an ID. And it also has a name. And in this case, we can just use name. So technically, we can do this. But since they're called the same thing, we can do this. And then lastly, it has a complete. So by default, a complete should be false. So just keep in mind that if you are passing in an object up here, you don't need to do this step. You can just use the object. And I'll give you an example of that on Monday. But for now, we're just using fields. So we know the default value of complete, and then the name is whatever the user types in, but what should the ID be? +1. Okay, but what if I have them mixed up? Like what if I have 4, 2? Would that still be +1? Then, so the length is 3. Yeah. So you would still eventually hit a number twice somehow. That might work the first time, but it's not guaranteed to work the next time, right? You could do that as well. But with this, the database should take care of this for you. But now we're just mimicking what the database does by doing our own unique identifier. So hop into Slack, and I'll Slack out this function here. So we need a unique identifier because ID is a primary key. All this is it will just return a random number using the math library, and we're sending it to the string, and we're only taking the first number. So there's multiple ways to get a random number or unique identifier. It's just one of the ways. I just pulled this off of Google. So if that's the case, then I'll just call this function. So get unique ID. This.get unique ID.
Isn't there like some possibility though that that's the same number?
There's a small probability of that. Yeah, because of how we're setting the range to be very large. But when we hook up our database, we don't need to worry about this step at all. Just because we're not, we don't have a database, it doesn't do this for us, so we have to do it ourselves. Okay, so the first step is grabbing the to-do. Second step is to create an object of the new to-do. And now we need to put together the new to-do inside of the current to-do, like the to-do array. We need to put our new object inside of the to-dos array. So our to-dos array is inside of state, and we need to change the state. And to change the state, we'll use an asynchronous function of setState, and that's from React itself. And then with this syntax, it's a key and value that you want to change. So the key is what you want to change. The first would be to-dos, so the to-dos array. And then the second would be what you want to change it to. In this case, I'm going to do a new array. So I'm going to do a new array with a new to-do, as well as everything else that's already in the to-do array. And does anyone remember the operator for that to get everything else from an object? Yeah, the rest operator. So we're getting the rest of the to-dos. So we're creating a new array with a new to-do that's being made, and everything else that's already there. We don't want to say to-dos, because what if it's another object here that we're not accounted for?
So instead of putting last, we're actually putting first.
You can put that either way. By default, it goes to the bottom. But since we're not dealing with a database, we can put it either side. So yeah, you can flip those if you want. Okay, so that's our function to add a new to-do. So first, we need to create an object for our new to-do. And then second is that we're updating the array for the new to-do and whatever's already in. So now, since we're in app.js, we want to have this function be called inside of our to-do form. And how do we do that? How do we, yeah. So if we want to give properties to another component to use, first off, you have to check if they're parent and child, because it doesn't work if they're siblings or if it goes up the stream. So since app is a child, has a child to-do form, we're able to pass it through props. So to pass it through props is we'll go to the to-do form component tag, and I'm going to call this add item. You can call it whatever you want. It's just a prop name. And then the add item prop, I'm going to set that to be this function we just created. So this dot add item. So to use this from a child component, like in form, you're passing it through props and calling it add item. And sometimes it's a good idea to name it the same as the function, or else you might confuse yourself, because I could call this whatever I want. Right? What if I call it list? That would be confusing of using that prop. So better to be descriptive when you're naming props. So then let's run our server, see what we have inside of our DevTools. So how do we run our React server, our client server? So yarn start. Awesome. Okay. And I'm going to look at my React tools. So inside of my app, this is where the state of all the to-dos, or So now we check our to-do form. So to-do form, sorry, it might be a little bit hard to see here. That says to-do form. So I just typed in, and it will try to match it as I type. So now we can see that the state is whatever the user types in, and the prop is the function that we created from app, and then we're passing it down to the form. So we're passing the add item function. So now we're able to use it by grabbing it through props. So let's go back to our form, and let's take care of this pseudocode task. So to grab something from props, you will do this dot props, and then the name of the prop. So this is where it's this to the left of the equal sign. That's the name of the prop, which is add item. Because this is not always the case. If I change it to list here, then it should be list here as well. But in this case, it's add item. And then something else is that with our function of add item, it takes in a name. So we need to also pass it a name. And where are we storing the name? From the state. So that's whatever the user is typing in is being stored there. So we'll be passing in the name from the state. So it will be this dot state dot name. And of course, you can clean this up a bit by destructuring it, but I'm just going to leave it as it is, just so you know where things are coming from. So that handles that part. So let's test it out. So I'm saying that whatever the user types in inside of this form, it will be saved onto the state. As soon as they press enter, this handle submit, then they'll take whatever's in the state and they'll go to the props add item function. And that's located in the parent, which is app.js. And with that, it'll take whatever the user's input is, take the array, as well as create the object with the user's input, and then change the state of to-dos to the new object plus everything else that's already in there. So now if we type something and hit enter, you can now see that the state inside of app.js is now 4. And I think it added it to the top here. And that's our unique identifier, because it uses numbers and letters. But we'll take care of that later. And then we can add as many as we want. And it will update the state as well as the list here, because that's grabbing from the state from app. So how this is rendered is from list, and it's grabbing the to-dos from app. Where is it? Yeah.
So do we no longer need a submit button?
It's good to have one, but as some forms, you can just hit enter. Other forms, yeah, other forms you can do submit. Yeah. So, I have no idea. This magic. It just reads the key value of enter to be submit, and since this is a text field, so it's just one line. You don't need to press enter to go to the next line. So that's another reason how it knows that it's a submit as well. I usually see the enter being submitted if there's most of the time if there's only one value. But if you have more values, the enter button to submit might not always work. So that's why you, by default, should have a submit button. Excellent question. But what's going on here? So every time I submit, the original value is still there, right? So then if I want to clear it out, I would have to manually clear it out. And that's a bad user experience. So just to help that out real quick, we'll jump back into the form. And just thinking about it, whatever the user's typing in, it updates the state. So what we can do is that we can just reset the state to the original value. So this will be this dot set state. And then it will be the parentheses and curly braces. And then what we want to change inside of the component state. And then what we want it to be, which is just an empty string. So that clears out. This line is not required, but it is nice to have. Okay. So then just to test it real quick, it clears out our form as we do it. But there is a problem with this current working application. So it doesn't matter how many to-dos I have, if I refresh the page, it loses it. It just goes to the default value of the original state. It doesn't keep that value. That's why we need a database attached to it. Because if we build it as is, then the data won't go anywhere. It won't be saved anywhere. It will only be saved in memory. It won't be saved inside of the database. So we'll be going over that some next week, of how we can add a database, and then no matter if we refresh or not, it will save all the data inside of the database. Okay, let's do one more step. Let's do a update. And this is a modified update. We're still updating because we're updating a single value. So what I want to do is if I clicked on a item, then it should cross it out if it's complete. So that's an update to see that if it's complete or not, it will have a certain style. But in most cases, you would update values. So this would be, instead of learn router, let's say I misspelled it, it will be editing the name itself. So that would be a bit different. But where is this located at? Where is it displaying all of the items? Inside of list. So we go to list, we can see that it grabs all of the items and then display them in a LI. So that's where we'll be going to next. And then we actually want to refactor it a bit because we don't want to update the whole list, right? If I click on one of these, it shouldn't update all of them. We want to update a single individual to-do. So that means we need to create another component. So that's why we will create another component of to-do to handle anything for that specific object. So then list is all of the to-dos together. And then to-do is just the single to-do object. And that's where we'll be doing our update. So let's go to our to-do list. So, but first, let me slack out the app.js as well as the to-do form. Any questions about the form?
So the props that are being passed down so far are 3 different kinds. One is just the name.
Yes.
Like string text.
Yes.
The other one is an array. Is an array or not?
An array. Mm-hmm.
And then add item is a function.
Yes. So technically, with props, you can pass anything down. You can pass on objects, which means almost anything. So function is an object, array is an object, a string is an object.
Can you show just where it was, how we got
this prop here. Let's do to-dos props because that's where we're going. So to-dos props, to-do is defined with this dot state, which means that we're storing it inside of our object, state object here. So to-dos is just an array of objects, to be more specific. What we're doing is that with this component needs to know this information. So we need to pass it down to that component. So we're passing down to-dos as a prop, and then we're calling the props items. So then, now that we're passing down the array and referencing it as a prop of items, inside of our to-do list, we're bringing in items, and then we're mapping through items and then printing them out in a list, list item. So let's create another to-do component. So let's go to our components folder, to-dos folder, and then we'll create another file calling it to-do. And make sure it's capital T to-do because it's an object, it's a component. And then what's the first thing we need to do before we type any further? Yeah, we need to decide whether it's a presentational or functional. And how you decide is based on the functionality of the component. For this component, we are going to display a single to-do object as well as the size. So based on that information, is this a logical or presentational?
Not presentational, but I thought you said it was like logical to test.
There's a way around that, actually. So yes, this is presentational. So since it's a presentational, we don't need to import the component portion of the React library, just the React. And then what's the key word for a presentational component? Const. So it'll be const to do, and then just thinking ahead, I'm going to leave it as an empty object because there's going to be a bunch of props being passed in. And then be sure that there's a parentheses here because we are returning what's coming. And before we forget, what should we do? Let's export it so we're able to use it in other components. So what I'm going to do here is that instead of rendering a list item and all of the information here, I'm just going to render a to-do component and pass down props. So let's update our to-do list to do that. So then instead of this to-do list, oh, I'm forgetting something. In order to use another component, what do we have to do? Import. So we need to import it from the path of which it is located in. So this will be import to do from /to do. / meaning it's in the same directory, we're just going to another file. Okay, so at this point, let's render out our to do. Tofu. Oh, that's not tofu. There we go. And we need passive props. Because we want to display everything a to-do has, as well as the functionality. But first, let's just do whatever the to-do item has. But before we forget, since we're looping through multiple items, we need the key prop. By default, that should be the item. And then we need to pass out everything a to-do has. So it'll be ID equal to item.id. It'll be name equal to item.name. And then complete equal to item.complete. But what happens when you have a bigger object? You would add on to this, right? Let's say it has like a age would be item.age. And we have another one, we would continue on, and that's just not as efficient as it should be. So instead of typing out every single property, we can use another operator. Any guesses? The rest operator. So the way the information is being passed in is that there's certain key value pairs. So inside of here, it will say name and then whatever the name is, and then complete, and then the value of complete. So all we need to do is we need to spread out the item. So everything the item has. So this is the spread operator. Spreading out everything the item has. So that means that an item has a ID, name, and complete. And if this changes, if there's more values and key value pairs, then we don't need to add on. We're just getting whatever it's already in with the spread operator. Okay, so that's what we're passing through is the key and then everything that the to-do has. So let's go into our to-do and fill out our props. So this is where the props is located at. If you're just passing one prop in, then you don't need the braces. But since there's multiple props, because we're passing in all of them, we need to do the curly braces. So what does a to-do have? ID, name, and the last one, complete. That's being passed down through props. ID, name, and complete. So essentially, when we're spreading out the operator, spreading out the item, that's what we did at the beginning. It will be name equals item dot name, and then ID equals item dot ID. Things like that. So that's the shorthand for it. And then we're grabbing all the values. So with that, now we can use those props to our advantage. So let's just display a list item here. And then we will just print out the name in between the list item. Probably won't be using the ID, that's fine. But inside of the list item tag here, I'm gonna kick it off to the next line because this is where I'll be styling of the complete. So if it's complete or not, it will have a different style. So I'm gonna do inline styling. And this is really, I'm gonna do a ternary operator. So instead of specifying a specific style, then I would need two. But since I'm doing logic to define the styles, logic is just one curly brace set. So this is a ternary operator of if it's complete. So if it's complete, then it will take in whatever the styles of to-do is. And we'll define what that is. We'll take in all of the styles from an object called to-do. if it's as well as the complete here too. So it will also have yeah, let's do that. Styles dot complete. So this is just the regular styles that it already has, in addition to if it's complete. And then outside of the first ending curly brace would be this. So it's the else for ternary. And else it would be just the styles to do. Or inline styling. That means that if you're styling and you just want to change like the background color, it'll be double curly braces inside of quotes, background, I'm just going to color white, something like that. But since we're doing logic to define our styling, that's just a single curly brace.
When the second style does it need to be?
Let me show you. It's because of what styles dot to do and what styles dot complete is. So let me show you another way to style. I'm going to zoom out like that. So the first way we learn is inline styling. The other way is that there's a few ways to style, and we'll get to the majority. The other way is to create an object of styles. So let's do that. You can do that at the top or the bottom. I usually do that at the top, but I've seen people do it at the bottom. It's just preference. So I'm going to say that this is my styles object. So with my styles object, what happened? Okay. I'm going to define different styles. So first off, I'm going to have a style of to do. And this is going to be just changing the cursor to a pointer. So that's our first styles. And we can grab this style here with styles.todo. And what this does is it will just grab whatever is in here already into the style tag here. So let's define this complete. So since it's another one, I'll do another comma, and I'll call this the complete style, which is another object of styles. I'm just gonna have the color be gray, and then the text decoration. And this is not CSS, it's JavaScript styling, so it's camel case, or else it will be a dash between it. So decoration line through. Oh, I'm gonna kick this off here. There we go. So let's read this out. So depending on whether complete, because complete is a Boolean, true or false, whether the to-do item is complete or not will change the styles. If it is completed, it'll take in these two styles. It'll take in the cursor as pointer, color it out as green, and put a line. If it's not complete, it hits this else, it'll just take in the first style, which is just the changing the cursor. So now we check out our code here. Let's see what this error is. So on line 9, there's something called item. I'm going to take out this note here. So that might be causing the issue. Okay, yeah, it was just that note. It was taking another curly brace and it was not reading correctly. So it should, I just took this note out. If you want this note, just put it inside of, on top of the curly brace. So we can see that anything with the complete false will have that style, and everything else will just change our pointer to our cursor to pointer. So that's the first step, is to define the visualization of how's it updated. So we're updating with just styling for now. But usually you'll update values, right? You would update the name or complete, something like that. Actually, let's just update the complete. So every time I click on this, that means that I'm changing the complete from true to false or false to true. That means that I need to create a function that does this for me. So before we create that function, we need to know where exactly we should put it. So let's go back into our structure here. So we know that our to-do just has individual object of the ID name. So everything that's to do that. So ID name. And then everything the list has is name and to-do. But when we're updating a single to-do, where is that single to-do being stored in? Yes, but which state? Every component has a state. Not in the to-do form. So the question is, where am I storing the information of the to-do object? So inside of lists, if we take a look at lists, this is what's being passed down, right? It's this to-do that we're using and then the items. So then that means that this is a prop. So this something's passing it down, which is app. So where we're storing the actual object itself is inside of app. And it's being passed down to lists, and then list passes it down to to-do through props. So it goes from app to list to to-do, this individual object here. So it's being stored inside of app. And we're passing the information through from parent to child all the way down the tree. So that might take a sec to sink in because of the structure of how it goes. So that means that when we're updating an object, we're updating it at this level, at the app.js level. So let's create another function that updates a single value inside of a single object. You can put it below or above the add item stuff. I'm just going to put it here. So I'm going to call this handle click. And the only thing I need to pass in as a param is an ID. I need to know which one I'm clicking on or which one that needs to be updated. So I need to pass in the ID. And also with the update CRUD action, we always need the ID, right? So what we need to do here is let's grab all of our to-dos again, and we can destructure it. And we're grabbing it from state and then creating a variable of to-dos. The first thing that we need to do is that we need to find the item we're looking for. second thing we need to do is that we need to change it to whatever that is not in this case, because we're dealing with a Boolean value. And we can do that all in one step. So you could find it first and then do them in individual steps, but I'm going to do it all in one step. So I'm going to do a this.setState. And then in this case, I'm going to have our to-dos be to-dos.map. And then as we're mapping through all of the to-dos, I'm going to reference them to a to-do, and then run some logic in here. So this is the searching phase. So if the to-do.id, the one that we're looping through, triple equals the ID that's being passed in, then that's the one we're looking for, right? Then we need to change the value. So we'll return everything else that's in there so that it will return the ID and the name, but we're changing the complete value, right? So we'll be changing the complete to be whatever it's not. So to-dos.complete. And then if it's not, then we should just return the to-do. Be sure it's outside of this if statement, because that means that if it's not the one we're looking for, just return it back and loop through another. So this might look weird at first, right? Because this is doing multiple steps at the same time. Yes.
So I just want to confirm, is handle click like a predefined?
Nope, we just created
Like
it.
handle submit.
Handle submit inside of to-do form here. That was just another function.
Function leaving.
Yep. On submit is a predefined attribute. And on change is also a predefined attribute. So if they're attributes, then they're exactly how they're spelled. But if they're function names, you can spell them however you want. So if I change it here, then I should definitely change it here because that's referencing the same function. Nope. Oh, yeah. For now, no. We have to create our own. Mm-hmm. So going back to our app, let's review what we just did because it's a lot of steps into one line of code technically, because technically you can put this all in one line. So first things first, we're setting the state. And what we're setting the state to is that we're looking through the array of to-dos for the one we're looking for. If it is the one we're looking for, then have it be whatever it has, just change the complete to be the opposite of what it currently is. If it's not the one we're looking for, then it will hit this return to do. It will just go to a next one. So what this will do is it will create another array of all of the to-dos that we didn't update, plus the new updated to-do item. And we're setting that back as a new array.
But still changing the capability.
Sure. So this right here, that just means that we're returning the ID equal to the to-do.id, as well as the name equals to the to-do.name, etc. Right? Whatever that object has.
Always returning everything of that
object. Yes, the key and the value. But instead of printing it out like this, we're just saying the spread operator. So we're spreading out everything a to-do has, but we're changing the complete to whatever is opposite of what it currently is. So this exclamation point just turns the opposite.
So those could be reversed. complete
Yeah,
without comma and integer.
you might have to be careful because it might not change because it reads from execution. So it'll pull it first and then it will change to complete. Because you might change to complete and this data might be the one that was already in state. So yeah. So yeah, that's just to update a single value.
So if you didn't have line,
Mhm.
the spread operator would still return.
Yeah.
But you're just changing, you're modifying.
Yeah, we're modifying it. Mhm. And then essentially, we're just returning an object back. Because if we don't have this line here, it will just create a new object of complete to be false, for example. We want everything that was already there plus our newer value. So we want ID and name, something that we didn't change, plus that's something we already changed. So yes, you do need both of these lines. Excellent question. So now that we define the function, you need to have it pass through all the way down the tree to do. So it's define an app. We need to have it to be to do. And there's no shortcuts. You have to go from app to list to do. And that's from props. So let's pass in this function through props. So I'm going to go down to the list component inside of the regular return. I'm going to pass in another prop to list. And we can call it anything. We can call it to do click. We can call it handle click. We can call it to do click. And this will be this dot handle click. So we're passing down a prop of to do click from the function that we created to update the complete. So now that we have a to do click here, inside of our list component, we will also pass in to do click. So we're grabbing to do click from props because it's being passed down here of to do click, which is our function we just created. So we're passing it down here, which now we can finally pass down to do. So this will be to do click equals to do click. So from props from app, we're passing it down to list. So let me write this out. So this is the click function. And then from list to do, we're also passing in again the click function. Now we're able to use it through props.
Why do we have to do equals to do click?
Because it needs a key value pair. Well, it's not technically a key value pair. We're just defining the props.
Oh, okay. So passing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or else if we just say to do click, it can mean a lot of things. It could mean, it will give you an error because it thinks that you're finding a function inside of it. Or
So the
something
second
like
half of that to do click, it references to line 4.
Yep.
But we're keeping the same name.
The same name. Technically, that could be whatever you want.
Yeah.
But we'll just keep it to do click for now. So now we have access to this function that's passed down all the way from app through props. So let's go to do, and here's a way you could do it. since we're just doing a click, to update, we actually don't need logic to do that. We can actually add in another attribute, which is the onClick. So that's why we can still have it as a presentational component. So inside of the onClick, we want to pass in through props, we're grabbing to do click, that's passing from app to list to do click, and then onClick will run that function. And then when we're running the function, if we look back inside of the app.js, it needs a parameter of ID. So we need to also pass in the ID. So let's pass in the ID. Now, there's actually additional step you have to do. It's because if we do it like this, it will always be called. We don't want that. So we only want it to be called when it's clicked. So what we will do is we'll pass it in as an anonymous function of to do click with the ID. Okay. So now if we go back, test it out, it changes the style, but most importantly, if we check out our items inside of our array here, like let's say the middle one, it changes the value from complete to whatever is not. So false to true, true to false. And that's what we want. Like yes, we can change the style, but most importantly, we should change the data. And then let me pass, not pass out. Let me slap this out. So here's the to-do, here's the list, and then here is the app. Okay. So what we just did, we're passing something down from app all the way down the tree to do. What's the problem with this methodology? It is complicated, right? Because what if I have a bigger tree? Because most trees they're not 2 or 3 levels, they're actually bigger. So let's say to-dos has comments and per se, and then also comments also has likes, and then likes has followers, etc. Right? We can make it as complex as possible. That means that if I want to grab any information or to have anything change, I would have to pass it down from app all the way down the tree. So if I want to have name, I would have to pass it from name to list, to do's, to comments, to likes. So this problem here, if you're drilling, or if you're passing down props to 3 or more components down the tree, that's called prop drilling. Prop drilling. Let me write it down. Prop drilling. So just to get the information you want, you have to go transverse down the tree or drill down the tree just to get a single information. Later on, instead of traversing the tree, we'll actually be putting it outside of the tree and referencing it there. That way we're not passing it down through props. But if we have another place, I'll use another color just so it's not confusing. We have a place to store all of these values, such as name, to-dos, all of that. Name, to-dos. We have a single place to store all those values. Instead of passing it down throughout the tree, we'll just call the place and the value. And that's a solution to prop drilling. Because it works when it's our application is small like this, so it's only at this level. But if it's any bigger, any more complex, then it will be a and then you probably would forget what to click is or what parameter it has. So you have to track it down the tree, you have to go back up to see what it was, and then go back down. So it's just inconvenient at that level of complexity. So later on, we'll be learning a tool to eliminate that problem. And there's actually two tools I'll be teaching. And that's with the Redux flux pattern, as well as the context API, React context API. So those two tools will help eliminate the problem of prop drilling and then have all of our information at a single location for us to use. Okay, so this lecture also has another section of a filtering for the footer. Do you all want to do that, or do you want to stop the project here? Because this is all you're doing for your own React project today. The other stuff is a filtering thing that you might or might not use for all of your projects. But it's already inside of your lecture notes. Yes, I will. So yes, no. So by the raise of hands, who wants to continue the lecture?
Otherwise, we're torturing ourselves.
Yeah, we'll be moving on to the next portion of today. Okay, yeah, which is the project day. It's just a little bit more. Just hang in there, and then you'll have a break, and then I'll break you out into the projects. How about that? Okay. So let's continue on with lecture. So today I want to add in another feature. Let's say my boss says my to-do list is it needs another feature inside of this list. So I'm going to be adding a filter. I'm going to be adding a footer that will filter through the to-dos. So then we need to figure out where the footer should be. And that's why drawing it out is helpful. So the way the website is laid out is that the form and the list are on the same page. So form and list and essentially app are on the same page. I would also want the footer on this page as well. So that means that it will be another branch on that section, on that. So that's the first step, is to decide where you want to put it or where it has to be. So in this case, I want it to be here. And this is the same level as the form in the list. So this is the footer. So what we would do is that we would create the footer component and then manipulate the data that's being shown through the list. So from the list here, we would, let's say we'll filter it out to only show the completed items. Then it will change. It will hide all the ones that aren't completed. Things like that. So let's start off by building off that footer component. So let's go to components, to-dos, footer. And this footer is only on this page. It's not through the whole application, or else I would put it in another folder. So that's another thing to think about as well. So we'll be doing a footer.js. What's the next step? decide whether it's a presentational or logical array. So here, what we're doing is that we are just displaying, we're just displaying the active filter. Presentational. So anytime I want to display and not run any logic, it'll be presentational component. So we'll import React from React. And then we'll define our footer component. So it'll be const footer. And there will be props, and there will be more than one props. So it needs a curly brace in there. And then since we're displaying something as parentheses, and before we forget, we should export default footer. Actually, before we move on, let me show you the the error you might encounter if you don't have this line. So I'm going to comment this out for now. You don't have to do what I'm doing. So everything works here, but if I take out the export line, like export default to do's, you'll get this error. You'll get a failed to compile error. And what it says is it attempted to import it, but it doesn't have an export. That means that your import path is wrong, or your export path is wrong or not defined. So if you ever see something like this, just check your imports and exports and make sure they're going to the right place. In this case, I just commented out. So that's just some errors you might encounter. So let's go back to the footer. So with this footer, I'm going to have it be a div. And inside of this div, I'm going to run some logic. So the logic that I'm going to run is I'm going to have an array of values. The value will be all active, to-dos, and complete. So what that means is that it will show all of the to-dos, all the ones that are not completed, and all the ones that are completed. So with this array, I'm going to map through the array. Call each one of those as F, short for filter. You can call it whatever you want. But I'm going to be calling it F for filter. And then here, I'll be doing some pseudocode of setting the filter. That's a to-do item. Well, I'll just leave it empty, because that will cause an error. It'll still cause an error. Okay. So we need to define a function that changes our filter. And then we need to do other things as well. Let's define that function. So I'm going to be creating another const filter link. And this needs the current, the name, as well as the set filter, which we will all define. So we'll take in those three parameters. And then we'll use those accordingly. So if the current filter is to the one that we already choose, then just return a span tag. of the name of the filter. If it's already the same filter, then just return it back. Else, we will return the span so inside of the lecture, there is some styling. I'm going to leave out the styling for now. I'll have an on-click instead of the set filter. And we want to do it as an anonymous function because we don't want it to fire off as soon as we land on the component. And then set filter will pass in a name, and I'll show you why. So that's the on-click for the span. And then inside of the span, it would be the name again. So then inside of our map, for each individual function, for each individual filter, we'll have a filter link, the thing we just created. And we need to pass in the current filter. We'll come back to the current filter and how we can grab it. The name of the filter, which is the name. And then another function of set filter. So for now, let's just put filter here. And this will all make sense once we build it fully out. Because now we only have bits and pieces. So for now, for our footer, depending on what filter it is, it will just change the name and the click of it to that filter. So let's define the filter. So by default, the filter should be called something, right? And we can store that and we can store that in this component, but we're actually using it in the list component because that's where it's being displayed. That's what's being changed. So instead of defining filter in this component, let's define it in a higher order component. So that way both footer and our list has access. So then we'll be defining what filter is inside of app.js. And a good place to do it is inside of our state, because that's where you can store items. So then the filter will be defined here, and by default, I'm going to have the filter to display all of the two. That's the value will be stored. So then we need to create a set filter function to change the filter from the state to whatever they clicked on. So that would be a set filter equal to the incoming filter to be this dot state dot this dot set state, since we're changing the state, to be filter. And the reason why we're saying filter, because what's coming in and out is like that. So the key of filter should be changed of the incoming filter. So instead of saying both of those together, there's a new syntax of ES6 and beyond, just saying filter. That's that. So just for notes, you can say that this is the same as saying this. Yes.
Why did you just say the set filter here? And what are constant?
Oh, that's another thing. So this is the function that actually changes it. The other one views it. I'll show you. Yeah. The filtering is a bit confusing.
They're both functions.
This one is a function, but the one in footer here just displays the link. So technically, you could say that this is a function or component. Yeah. So now that we have it defined a filter here, as well as the function, we need to pass down this here, as well as the state of function to foot. How do we do that? Through props. So we need to pass down the filter itself and the filter, set filter. So this will be filter as well as the set filter. We need to do that through props. So then in here, instead of saying cons, brackets, filter equals this out state, I can just add a comma and also pull it out of state here, a filter. And then, yes, let's import it. Actually, let me test this out. VS Code has a thing where it sometimes auto imports it. So if I do the footer, does it auto import? No. What if I do footer and then enter? Okay. So you see an auto import like this? That will do it for you. It will set the import for you. But just always remember to import it above to use it. So now let's pass those two things down to props. So it'll be filter equal the filter variable from state, as well as the set filter function or set filter prop to be the set this component set filter function. So we're passing down the filter and a function to the foot. So then inside of our footer, we need to make sure that we're pulling in the right information. Let me slack this out. We need to make sure that we are pulling in the filter that's being passed in through props, as well as the set filter function. And then we're using it here. So with those things being passed in, we're also are passing it in here to another function or component. And the filter is the current filter. It's equal to the new filter. And then set filter, which is the function from app.js that changes the filter to whatever you choose. So now if we go back to our application, okay, that's totally fine. That means that this has to be a unique key prop. We can see that it's active, all are completed. And you can fix the styling of that to be with the inline styling. But for now, we'll just have it like that. So let's make this work. So anytime we click on it, it will change the filter. So then this click event will change the filter to whatever the filter is. Well, let's change it to view the filter. So I think it actually works. If we go inside of our React tools, we can see that the filter by default should be all. And then anything that we click will change the state here of filter to whatever we clicked. But that works in memory, but it doesn't work with our views. So let's change the views to be whatever the filter is. So that's one last step. So in this case, we need to go back to app.js because this is where it houses all of the to-dos. And then within this app.js, we are going to create another function of showing specific to-do items depending on the filter. So we'll be doing a conditional. So let's create another function here. I'm going to call this visible item. And we don't need anything to be passed in as a parameter. So I need two things from state. I need to know what the current filter is, because that's what's changing every time we click. So the current filter, and then the current to-dos, because we'll be changing what the to-dos will be. So const to-dos as well as filter. And this is both from this dot state. So then let's do our conditional. There's multiple ways you can do conditionals, but I'm going to use a switch statement. So switch is based off of the filter. And then within a switch statement, you have just define our default. So our default would return return all of the to-dos. That's by default. It should just return all of the to-dos. And then we'll have individual cases. So if the case is active, and be sure spelling is important, because this active is the same case in spelling as the footer active here, and then it will be completed and all. So then if it's active, then we'll just return all of the to-dos and we'll filter out all of the to-dos. We'll call each one of those T that it's not complete. So that's saying that if the to-do object is false or complete, filter goes out. We should do the other case of completed. We're returning. Yeah. So returning will kick you out of there as well. So then we'll do a similar thing for completed, but the opposite logic. So we'll do another filter here of T equal to T dot complete. And then this handles our all. We don't need an all case because by default we're rendering all of the to-dos. So no need to go an additional step. So reading this is that based on whatever filter the state changes to, whether it's all active or complete, if it's active, then return all of the to-dos that are not complete. If it's not active, if it's completed, then show all the to-dos that is completed. So that's the logic there. But if you check this out, there's actually one more additional step we need to do. is that this is still changing the state, but what component actually renders out this particular thing? The list, right? We're not changing it in the app, we're actually changing it in the list. So let's tweak our list just a bit. So inside of our list, we're saying that whatever the to-do items is being displayed. So instead of that, let's just change it up to be the function that we have. So this dot visible items, and let's call that function. So instead of displaying all of the to-dos always, we're displaying this function. This function will display according to the filter.
Say that again. It's listed.
Yes. So before it was just displaying to-dos, which it will always display all of these to-dos. But now it will display this function, and this function will only render the to-dos based on certain filters. So now if we change it, it will re-render to the values accordingly. Okay, so let me slack out what I have, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. And then Monday, we'll be returning to React, but we'll be introducing a small little feature. Okay, so any questions about our current app? It's a bit complicated, right? It's a lot of steps, a lot of things going on. So for your assignment today, don't worry about this footer and filter. Worry about the form, the list, and the to-do. But in your case, it will be called something different. So, quick review. What is the thing called when we're just displaying information? Presentational component. So this, when we're just displaying items, it will be a presentational component. What about when we're doing any sort of logic, we're storing something, and has a keyword of class? What is that? It's a logical component. So those are our two components. It's a logical and presentational component. And then what do we use to store our properties? State. So every component has a state, and a state is just an object. It's used as component storage. And what is it called when we are passing down properties from parent to child? Props. So when we're passing down information from parent to child, it's props. And again, it's only one way. So if you want it to be between two sibling components, you would have to use a higher order component. So in this case, we'll be using app. That's a higher order component. And that's essentially the big intro of React. We'll be adding more to this as time goes on. So any questions? Yes.
More
No, that's
wrapping up to that style sheet. Why some have this stuff the ternary operator.
Oh, this one here?
Yeah, and the other one didn't.
Yes.
The false.
Somewhere. I know.
You were the right one. It was just the second default. Like second half of the turn.
Oh, yes. So with this, is that usually for styles, we're defining them, but in this case, we're defining them through logic. So it's a single curly brace. And then our styles really depend on a conditional. And one way to write a conditional is the ternary operator. So that's the question mark in the colon. So our condition is, if it's complete, do this. If it's not complete, then do this.
Or is they have the curly braces because there's two?
Yes.
Oh, no.
So there's two. If there's more than one of them, then you would need a curly brace. If there's only one of them, you don't need a curly brace. And for this case, we're destructuring everything it has. So technically, you can do that here as well. Or you can leave it as that. Because it's whatever's in between this code block anyways.
So why is the first one have it?
Just to show you two ways.
Oh,
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? So what the thing about React is that I can lecture forever and you can go through tutorials and read articles about it. But the best way you'll learn and to understand props, state, and components and all that is just by doing. So the more you do, the more you learn. So that's why I will encourage projects of just building stuff inside of React. So if there's no other questions, let's stop the recording here. And then